Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of TRCOA's Behind the Groove. If you're here live, please introduce yourself and ask questions in the chat as we go along. This episode is sponsored by Stinson Recording Studios. Also, if you find this content useful, please like this video, and if you are new, please subscribe to our channel. We make new content every week. Today we are proud to have Ben Kliever. He's going to cover the ins and outs of mixing country music. Ben is the owner of Nebula 88 Studios and one of TRCOA's beginning recording techniques instructors. Without further ado, Ben Kliever.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TRCOA's Behind the Groove seminar. I'm Ben Kliever and we're going to be taking a look at another lesson tonight. And tonight we are going to be talking about country music. So I have a track here that I recorded previously, and this is kind of now there is different, just like all these other genres of music where you have large groups, like there's always going to be subgenres of different styles that go into these great, awesome, yeah, thanks Alec, glad that last night helped you. So when we're talking about country here, there is different styles where you got this very modern country too on some of the stuff that is almost even blending some of the synthetic stuff in there now, which is cool in its own right. There's also then you have the more natural kind of hillbilly blues honky tonk kind of stuff, and then you have kind of your more classic country. The one we're going to be kind of looking at tonight's kind of a mix of the more kind of old school with a little swampy kind of feel to it, but with still, I got some pumped up modern things that are going to be going on in this mix. So we'll go ahead and we'll dive in. We're going to look at drums, bass, guitars, and the vocals, and how I approached this mix and how we got there. So let's go in and let's take a look at this session and just kind of take a listen to what we got, so you can see now. Just kind of a heads up, so y'all know on this session. This was a session where I had, which there will be times where this is exactly things that you'll have to deal with. I was in a place where I had a limited number of microphones, so I had to choose, very wisely in a small area on what I had to use to get the sounds. So even though there is a smaller amount of tracks than maybe if I was doing a larger production, we can still take a limited amount of tracks and make it feel a lot bigger. So here, without that, we'll kind of take a listen to what we got here, and then we'll talk about how we got there and look at each of these individually.
Hey, hey, mama, everything is alright. Hey, hey, baby, get your dancing shoes on tonight. You're looking so fine, you really blow my mind. Get on your best dress, honey, we're gonna have a really good time. There's no other girl.
So there's kind of a brief section of that. We'll look at some of these other sections in here where I'm doing some of this automation and just talk about what I'm automating. But that's going to kind of give you a feel for what we're looking at tonight. So it's got this kind of, swampy, bluesy, more open arrangement, very natural feeling, a little bit of that kind of old school twang to it with a little bit of the new stuff mixed in there. So that's the song that we're looking at from that. So just overview, I kind of want to show y'all too just where this mix started, so you can see, what everything that I've done, and kind of just so you can hear kind of the changes of where this mix comes from and what you can do to manipulate stuff. So I'm going to leave the main just mastering, like the main just limiter on here, just so it stays loud for y'all. But just so y'all kind of hear, this was, this is what this, where this track started, whenever this all, before we added any kind of widening or big tools or any of that kind of stuff. So this is just kind of where it started.
Hey, hey, mama, everything is alright. Hey, hey, baby, get your dancing shoes on tonight. You're looking so fine.
So you can hear we just got, obviously there's going to be a lot more energy and everything gets pushed forward, but we get a lot brighter, a lot beefier, and a lot less like just kind of like that muddy kind of dullness is what I'm getting out of there, which is kind of the gist of whatever genre you're working with, no matter what, is accentuate the good stuff that's in there. Now each stuff might have a different area where you're accentuating it, and then clean up the stuff you don't need. So let's go ahead and let's start with where I would start on this mix. So the first thing that I would do when I'm coming into a mix like this is, before I even do any plugins, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going in to make a fader mix. And just like many of the major genres that are radio friendly, which is, you know, country, tons of the like country and pop and lots of the hip hop stuff that's coming out now, all this, like those genres, the most important thing by a lot is for sure the vocals. That's what everyone's there to listen to. Now, there can be in country a ton of different instrumentation, where in this one we only have acoustic and electric guitars, but there's plenty of times where you'll start seeing mandolins, banjos, fiddles, and all that kind of stuff layered in there, which gives us a lot more where we got to find space for all this stuff in there. So panning is going to be another pretty important thing that you want to pay attention to in country, just making sure each one of these things is sitting in their spot, but where the drums and like where you have the drums and the guitar and the vocals being like the kind of the big thing that everyone's hearing here. So the first thing every time, like when I'm going into a mix like this, the first thing I start with is the drums, and that's like setting my levels. So it's like if I was sitting here doing this, I would actually, you know, take all these all the way down. I would, like when I started, I took all my faders down and I bring the fader mix up, and I like to start with the drums. And so I started with the kick, and I'm getting the kicks built up together. Let me just turn these all drums off, and then we'll just look at kind of the kicks. So when we started with that, and I went and found the balance that I wanted from those. And then as I bring in my kick, the next thing I would want to do is then I bring in my snare, and I take that up from the bottom, where I'm going to blend that in with my kick until it's feeling. So it'd be more like, you know, I start down here, you know, and then I blend it up until I really feel like I have the snare where I want it. So, and these I kind of already had my distances set between these two, so I just wanted to get that back where it was. And then, now here's something that's different that, you know, is just a little trick I learned from watching other engineers, is they'll start with the overheads in mono before they pan them out, and then we'll bring it all the way down, and then I bring that in until I feel the blend is where I want it to be with the overheads, where they're, I need to bring my solo in, that'll help, right? Until I'm feeling like the energy level that I want with all this stuff sitting in mono, where it's, because your kicks and snares are always something you have in mono where it's straight up the middle. So now that I'm blending these all together, it's going to give me a really good balance of, make sure this is kicking off here. Really good balance where they're sitting. So then when I pan these out, then I have a really good starting balance for where my drum set has already been. And I'm gonna hide my rack and floor because he ended up not hitting like this at all really in this performance. And whenever he didn't hit any of it, it really just kind of made these big resonant noises that it added to the drum set, which I did not like. And that is why I ended up not using these mics at all in there, because he ended up not playing them. So we can even take that out, you know, the second that I'm done seeing that I know I don't need that. So then the next thing I would do after I've done that is that's when I bring in my bass into this, because I like since the way this is building up, our foundation is always going to be our drums and bass. So I'd start with my drums, simply getting them started, and then, you know, then I'd take my bass up until I feel that it's sitting where I want it with my drums. And then from there, before I actually bring in the instruments, which we had more instruments, mandolins and fiddles and all that kind of good stuff, then I'll start actually bringing in my lead vocal next to get, because we have our main loudness from these two things, and then, you know, these are actually, these are going to be more supporting kind of in country. You can kind of think of it that way. And then that's when I bring in my vocal and let that all sit where it needs to.
All right. Hey, hey, baby, get your dancing shoes on tonight.
And so now that I got a good balance between my, again, like every time I've started these, I would start these with my fader down and I just pull it up until it really feels good where it's sitting with these elements. And now once I have all those,
everything is all right.
That's when I would bring in my guitars at that point, which...
Hey, hey, baby, get your dancing shoes on tonight.
Which here's our guitars that we got going on. And here's what I'm talking about with panning. Because with some of this, like with country, a lot of times the artists, especially especially in this session, they were all playing together. And a lot of the way that country's tracked, you're gonna have all your rhythms going, like with your drum, like your drums, your bass, your guitars, they're all gonna be going most of the time playing at the same time in little isolated rooms, how country is usually tracked. And so they may not be doing as much overdubbing as you see in like modern rock and some of this stuff on that front. Like even like vocally wise, this was a very simple track with one vocal. Even in like major country vocals, some of them only even have like 4 tracks because they try to keep it a little bit more simplistic, and that's just part of the vibe of that genre. So, but when I was talking about panning earlier, this is what we're talking about. So I got a lead track that's going on, like when we look at this. So we have an electric guitar rhythm that's going on the whole time. Then we have a lead where you can kind of see all these little fills and solos that are going on. And then we have an acoustic guitar track as well. So what I'm doing here to fill out the space is I'm keeping my electric and my acoustic. I have them actually on opposite sides of the mix here. So I don't have them spread completely out because I want them to still kind of be partially a little bit in each side, so you're still feeling it, but and even on this, you kind of see like on my lead, I have it slightly to the left on here, like during all these parts and the rhythms, like during when he's singing and doing any of that kind of stuff. And that's because I want to keep the vocal and bass and drums and everything that's supposed to be in the center, staying in the center, and then moving that just a little bit so my stereo image is feeling as smooth as it can be. And so, but then later you'll actually see that's what I'm looking at in the automation. We'll go into that. When I go into breaks where there's no singing, I bring it into the middle, so it's the main thing. But we'll look at that more in those individual sections. So once I've brought these in,
everything is all right.
Then I have then I really have my balance going, and I can really now dive into my mix. So we're going to start with the drums, look across the drums, and then kind of go as we build up, and then listen to the whole thing and go through that. So kick-wise, what we're looking at here is we'll take a listen to the kicks first, just because modern-wise, I'm on this one again. I'm going for a more beefy low end, a little bit of flap on the top end, a little bit of that high end, but I'm scooping it pretty good, so we don't have like this where it's a strong kick drum. But you'll see. You'll hear how I kind of carve it out a little bit here. So this is the main kick in, just so you can hear it. And then this is where we're going with it. So I'm trying to make it kind of feel hollow in the middle, beefy in the bottom, and then like slappy on the top. So it's really kind of cutting through. And what I'm doing here when I'm going through this is I'm driving it through the API channel on the VCC in the mix rack. And APIs, for those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're just very clean, very good with transients. So this is something where I wanted to keep my drums as very clean as possible again in this front. So I went with the API where it's not quite as punchy as the Neve, which has more grit, but it's still punchy, but stays very clean. So that's where I ended up moving with this. And then I'm just kind of tapping it where it gives a good, where it just adds a little character to it. And here's where I'm starting to scoop out some more of these kind of mid areas. Like I'm moving a bunch out of here at 200 because that's where my snare is hitting, because I want my snare to cut through, because he's doing a lot of stuff where the snare and the kick are happening at the same time in this beat that he's doing. And then I'm taking out a lot of this, like this mud in like the 3 to 500 range. 334 is where I end up pulling right there. And then this is my big chain where I'm making a lot of big moves, which is really making the biggest taste on this. So I did some small cleanup to do that. And then I pulled back just a little bit of the actual beef in this part, and then I'm gonna punch it up a little bit later just because I wanted to control where I was at that point. I always like doing cuts on stuff around 34, 35 in analog music like rock and country and things like that, just because there's not gonna really be massive sub information like EDM or hip hop that's gonna be down there. Anything that we would need, even in those, you'd still roll off around 20. But then I'm hitting around a 4-to-1 compressor where we're just tapping it, getting it to move. And then I'm doing an extra boost over here at 5K to add more point, cutting more 200 at the snare as I'm listening to this. And that's doing a little low, and then ended up cutting just a little bit of the super highs. Punched a little bit of the presence with this guy, and then added a little bit of this punchy low end back in to beef up. Just added a little more punch. I really like this thing. It kind of acts in parallel a little bit. So when you take out like the high, just adding more of that air and putting that kick through there and adding a little more low end. So then when I bring in, and then the next thing, then we're just gonna start going through, and we'll go a little bit quicker through this part. So, you see the API that I'm going through, hitting the same thing, doing a lot of the same cleanup kind of areas, not the exact same spots, very close, but just cutting out all that bad, like just kind of those mids. And then I'm pushing I'm still trying to get some high end out of this kick, where you can see like I'm pushing it like 2K, and then I'm cutting again at below this 800, cutting again at 200 to kind of clear out for my snare. But then down here, I'm actually boosting on the low end on my kick out, which has a bigger low end, which is why I cut on the other one to make these match together and get a little more punchy kick when they're added together. Now, when we go into the snares, our goal is going to be to have a nice, bright, punchy snare. And you can hear how much brightness we're getting from that snare bottom when we bring that in, which is what we want to be using in there. And you definitely hear a lot of the snares more in this side of the country stuff. So in there I'm hitting the same things where I'm pushing the API. I'm going to be having the API on all my drum stuff, and then in snares pushing a bunch of presence up here at 1.5 on this on the front there, cutting around 400 where there gets to be mud, punching some low end around 200, I believe 205. And then just doing a low cut up to a filter up to about 77, always cleaning up the low end every time on all this stuff. Cleaning up again, doing a little extra, just cutting up the low end before that would be any muddy with the kick, because the kick and the snare are just happening a lot at the same time with the way he's just kind of doing this roll and drum beat. And then finally I have I really like the distressors on snares. They're great on vocals too, but they handle high end, like the high end information really well. So these kind of more punchy poppy snares, like when I want them to have that high snap, like distressors are just really good for that. So you can see I'm doing 3-to-1 with I'm doing a very opto attack. I'm kind of slow on the attack, because as we get more to opto on the attack, it's slower on that, but then really fast on the release. So, and then just kind of a medium release where it's really, with snares and releases, you just want to make sure your release is, your gain reduction is usually drop back down before the next snare hit happens. That's usually just kind of a good rule of thumb. Then on the snare bottom, I'm approaching it the same way, but I'm pushing more highs. I'm still pushing the presence at 1.5, but now I'm pushing more 5K, same cuts, still trying to get low end out of there because I want my snare to be beefy still. And then I just moved to a different cut where I just felt I had a little bit of mud right there in the middle, and then hitting it with the distressor again. And then on my bus, I just, again, wanted to reiterate cleaning up the low end where the kick is so that they work well with each other, and the low end's coming from my kick and the snare's not getting in the way of that. But it still feels like there's body to the snare. And then we bring in our overheads. And I'm pushing those API like we said before. Pro Q gonna be just cleaning up the low end. I'm trying to keep these very natural on the overheads. Usually in country too, like just when you're tracking it, you really want to try to, like this is one of the genres where you want to for sure make sure that your overheads are a full view of the kit and not really just trying to get the cymbals, because it's something where we want to have that full kit view, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute when we talk about our reverb for this. So adding my API selection, just cutting out my low end where none of that's in the way. I didn't really feel like I had anything until I got over here where I started doing some more cuts, and I just chose it to do it with the analog section here. So you can hear how much these boosts are doing. So again, I'm using the 401 over here, hitting it kind of like an LA 2A side over here because I wanted it to push the sides up. I actually was using circuit 1 on the kicks because I didn't want the sides being pushed up in that mid area, but with this, I wanted this to be adding more energy from the overheads, pushing a little of the high end from the 7K, pushing a little presence around 1K. Oop, let me make sure that goes back. Didn't mean to click that. With this one, just so you know, it's like you have to hold like the command button if you want to actually go to individual frequencies, and that's how I ended up getting to 1K on this. Then I did a pretty big cut at 800 because I just felt like there was a lot of stuff I didn't like, and this just cleaned it up. Like you can, just a lot of those mids weren't very pleasing, and I just wanted to get them out of the way. So I'm hearing just the smack, then a little beef, and that's a shelf on the high end. And so that's what I'm doing on that. And then I have all these running into my drum bus, which hitting it with a little tape, just a little bit. I'm not going crazy with this because I didn't want it to saturate the drums. I just wanted to give it a little bit flavor. And this was really just to catch a little bit of like big hits whenever they're doing, just tapping a little bit on this to just keep it under control. And then just a little small cleanup here. So and then I'm actually running a limiter here too on this just to keep my drums at a ceiling level, so it's not gonna pass that no matter what when it gets there. I'm really not pushing it hard into the limiter. I'm more just giving the drums a ceiling so they're not gonna move up, and this helps with drums and transient material a lot because this keeps your headroom down when you put some limiter stuff on here. Now this is the one that's in kilohertz. I'm a really big fan of like the ones that Waves has in there, but this is just a different one that I know all of y'all will have. So it operates slightly different. There's usually in limiters, there's a thing that's like ceiling, but with this, it's like the threshold is what the ceiling is, and that's this little bar here, and you're actually driving the end gain instead of using like an actual threshold and a ceiling like you would in some other limiters. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but you can still get the exact same effect of what you're trying to accomplish with the kilohertz limiter. Now, after that, to kind of pump everything up, and I added parallel drum compression here with from all my parts here, and let me do Option Command H allows me to do copy to send. So I'm going to do the volumes just where they're sitting the same way as my drum mix is sitting here. And I didn't send the overheads in there because I wasn't trying to overly compress them in this scenario for any of his hits. And on this, I used the Bluey, which is the blue edition of the 1176. It's just nice and warm, and then I have it pushed pretty good. So you can hear what that's doing, and it's this is just my parallel processing that's going on. So I'm slamming it pretty good, and then this is just being blended in with my main drums. So, which just makes a huge difference in how much energy we have. Now, lastly, I have my drum verb here only. It just happens to be in country on this. Now, this is opposite of what I would do in some other genres. Like when I'm doing like the heavy rock stuff that I've showed you, heavy rock or metal kind of stuff, I'm basically only using reverb on my snares and my toms because I don't want anything else. Everything's got to be super, super tight. On this, I kind of want my drums, my actual directs to be more dry. And on this, now, again, like I told you at the beginning, this is a little bit smaller session with not as much stuff going on in it. So I ended up not having a bunch of extra mics to do individual hi-hats or cymbals or anything. So I would, if I had those in there where I had rooms or cymbals, I would add them into my drum verb. But with this, I am only using the overheads for the drum verb, and this is like extending the space. I'm just using a nice warm drum room here. Just a plate drum room off this one of their presets here, which sounds really good, and just kind of dialed it in. And then I just really control it, which I always like doing EQs after my drums. I'm getting all the low end out, getting all the super high end out, getting the mud out, and letting it be controlled, because reverb can get out of control really quick, and it can really muddy up and make your mix not punchy if you don't control reverb. So here's just the difference with reverb in and out. And my goal is to extend the space, like extend the room that it's in, and you can hear when that reverb's in. It's adding a lot more of that going on in there. So now that we've looked at the drums, we're gonna move on and just take a look at the bass here. So with the bass, I mean, I liked his bass tone already out the gate. Thought he had a very good bass tone already out the gate that we were taking straight from the takes. So I threw a little VTM, used this, dropped it on the 15 IPS part because that just tightens up the low end more, and I like how it's tightening that up and pushing it forward just a tad. Now I'm doing some EQ before my compressor here to really push attack. So on this, normally, the first thing I try is around 1K, which you can see I'm pushing pretty hard, almost 9, plus 9 on that. And then I ended up pushing the low end down here around 50. But then the more I listened to this, I felt like I needed more point. And that's where I went to 2K and brought in some more of this going on. And so then now that I have my point and my low end going on in there, then I'm hitting my compressor with a little more attack. So it's clamping down a little more on my bass than I would on drums. So it's, keeping it nice and level as it's going through here. And then, yeah, welcome. And then lastly, I just dropped this in because after going through and listening to it, I wanted to carve out just a little space for where my kick drum was happening and where my snare was happening. Where it just gives it a little bit more space by me clearing out that EQ. Now, here's something I definitely like doing. I know I've showed y'all this before with some of the other stuff, but now we're doing it on country. So I'm pulling up the micro shift. I chose shift 2 on this because what I want to do is I want to make my bass feel a little bit wider than where it's at. So it covers more of the spectrum since it is a little more of a sparse production. So listen to how much bigger this makes our bass. Feel kind of how it gives that more space into the mix. So really you can see, I'm not doing a ton of stuff to his bass. I'm just really controlling it, getting rid of some of the frequencies that are fighting with the other stuff, boosting up the low end, giving it some more point around that 1.5 to 2K range, and then adding a little widener over here and pushing that up until I feel like it feels good where it's not taking over the bass, but it's just supporting it. So now that I've done that, we will talk about the guitars since we were going through and the other stuff. But I went through and actually we'll go ahead and we'll go to the vocals since that's what we're looking at before. I ran a little auto tune on him so we can
everything is all right.
And I just I froze that track to guarantee that all my auto tune moves were sitting where they were at, and it was just really just to tighten him up just a little bit. So on the vocals here, what I'm doing, the first thing is I'm doing some EQ to really bring his voice out.
Everything is all right.
So doing a high shelf here, boost, and then that's really all I'm doing this first thing. Just doing a high shelf and then cutting out the low end underneath his voice. So that's just the first move, is just to
Everything is alright.
just get that air in there.
Hey, hey, baby, get your dancing shoes on tonight.
Then throwing a de-esser on there to control the de-esser. Colin's asking, are you doing a low cut on the bass too? Yes. So I actually, right here, I have a low cut at 35 hertz going on at the bottom here. So usually I always do this with analog stuff, like up to like 35, like things below 35, especially on a big system, you're really not even gonna hear. And if you don't have subs in there, they're still not gonna be there. So, but yes, I'm always doing a low cut on my bass, just on the very, very lowest of lows to make sure that there's no buildup down there. And then I believe I did, yeah, and that's the only EQ moves I was making on my, let me go back to that. Doing my low cut there, and then I clicked on the wrong one. Let me click on this, because I know I did a low cut here at my SSL at 35 as well. So I'm just doubling up, making sure that the low cuts stay in there. So it's out, so I still got the low end, but it's out of the way. Then after I did the de-esser, then I went in and I used the 1176 Bluey, which is a little more vintage feel as well.
Everything is alright. Hey, hey, baby, get your dancing shoes on tonight.
And you can hear how much the compressor's bringing that up forward. Now here's a big thing too. I really like using limiters on vocals because it just lets them sit in their place where we have a good flat, where they're sitting at the spot that we need them to sit the whole time, because vocals need to be loud and everyone needs to hear everything that's going on. So again, I'm using the limiter in kilohertz just because I know that's something all of y'all have. Of course, man, you are welcome. And
everything is alright.
You can see I'm just tapping it a little. I have my gain set here.
Hey, hey, baby, get your dancing shoes on tonight. You're looking so fine. You really blow my mind.
So now you can see it's not going past 14 now that I have my limiter engaged. So it's sitting at a hard stop right there, so it's not going to go louder than that, and it's going to sit in its spot where it's sitting, where every vocal feels level at that part. So now a big thing after that is bringing in, a lot of the wet stuff that's going on with vocals. So again, I'm bringing in a reverb here, which I'm using a nice plate here with a decently kind of long sound. And then again, I am controlling it with reverb after it. So I'm cutting out the lows, cutting the mids that are out of there. I'm boosting a little bit of the presence, but then cutting out all the super highs above 8K. And you'll hear when that comes in.
Everything is alright.
So we just got this nice feel. That'll get tucked a little more when the guitars come in. And then I have a CLA-ish. Then this is the thing I've showed y'all before with the pitch widener, where I have just a trick that I learned from watching engineers that have been doing this longer than me. And this is something that just allows us to get a natural feel of widening without, and then I didn't use a little micro shift because the micro shift does a little bit more to the sound, where this is going to be super transparent besides just making it feel a little wider. So let's take a listen when that comes in.
Everything is alright. Hey, hey, baby, get your dancing shoes on tonight.
I'll let y'all hear it really where you can hear it by itself, just so you can.
Everything is alright. Hey, hey, baby.
Just really adding that outside. And then here on the last thing, I'm doing a quarter note delay. And I'm doing that because that's going to be in time with the song, kind of a rhythm, and it gives us this bouncy thing going on behind it. So
everything is alright.
But when you have your instruments back in, it's not as
everything is alright.
And now once I get some of the more wet, we'll look at the guitars now, then we'll look at the mix bus, and that'll be the main overview of this. So with the guitars, I said I got 2 electric guitars, and then I got an acoustic here. So I'm really trying to keep these, pretty simple. I have them all bussed into the same thing. I'm just controlling the low end here up to 100 on the bus. I have them all just going into a guitar bus so I can control them all at once. Inside each one, I got an electric rhythm on the right, and then I have an acoustic rhythm on the left. We'll look at the electric first. And on here, I really love the CLA3A, like an LA3A, but we don't, this is going to be doing something very close to that. When I go to the LA2A setting on circuit 2 for the slate thing, it's going to be pretty close to that. So you can see I'm actually pushing pretty hard.
Everything
Just really, I'm always trying to hype up guitars just to bring them up. So like, again, I'm not scared to push buttons really far. I'm going plus 11 on this at like 10K to bring up the brightness that's in there. I gave it a little presence at 1.5, and then boosting a little low end around 200 just to give it a little meat, and then I'm just cutting all the low end. Then just doing some, since it's clean, I'm doing just a little to keep it, you know, nice and even on everything here. And then I'm going to talk about the radiator all at once with those in a minute. So then I'm doing very similar things on the lead, except I'm actually, so I have the 1.5K like I did on the other one pushed, but then I'm also pushing a little over 3K more, like pretty hard, so I can make sure that that lead's really cutting through. Let me go to a lead spot. So here's like a solo. You can just hear how much brightness that's adding in by doing those big moves. And then these last moves, we'll go look at them all at once with the radiator, because I just want to talk about that separately. So, and then on acoustic over here, I kind of want to, so it's very dark here at the beginning, which is just not going to cut through a mix with a bunch of other stuff here. So I'm pushing around 1K just to be in a little bit different spot, pushing around 5K than my electrics, so it's in a little bit different area. So we're still hyping the good high end, but it's sitting in its own frequency, so it cuts through a little bit more. Cutting a little mud at 300, boosting a little low end around 200 to match the rhythm, and then doing the same thing with like the LA2A setting on circuit 2 of the 401 here. Now I'm gonna bring in the radiator, which is, I really like, this is, one of the sessions I got to sit in, there was an engineer, she came in from Nashville, so she does bluegrass and country all the time, and this is one of the things she liked to use on all her natural instruments like guitars and upright basses and stuff, like something where you feel like you need to give it a little more boost and a little more energy, but like in these genres, they really don't want you to change their tone that much, so you don't want something that's completely changing it, and this stuff is very subtle with still adding a little punch to it. So here's, take a listen on the electric. At where this all is hitting on my meters, because even though you can look at meters down here, this is kind of telling you truly analog where it's hitting, and I can see my mix. This is before my limiter is, you know, pushing right up against 0, which is what I want to see. It means my gain staging was very good, and I'm not pushing anything super crazy where I'm having to trim a lot of stuff to try to fix it, which you can still do that. But if we can get our gain staging right out the gate with all your mix and everything sitting there, you should be bouncing pretty good on your VU meter, where you're pretty much tapping 0 right there. Now, just to come over here and take a look at my my mix bus here that I'm sending everything into at the end of this here is, I have the virtual mix bus here. I ended up selecting the SSL G series, which I just like the way it sounded after I tested all these when I'm listening. So this on the mix bus just really glues everything together and makes it feel like it's all in the same place. Tightens everything up. Off. On. And I'm actually pulling back a lot here. I just want to give it a little flavor and feel like it's in the same mix. So like it's all kind of coming together, and that's what I'm doing on that. And then I ended up using the Air EQ. I'm rolling off, again, 35 hertz down here at the low end, because I'm always just conscious. 31 hertz, somewhere always around 30 to 35 is always good with these kind of things, just to control that super low end. Adding a little air in the top so it's nice and crisp, and then I just added a little more presence right here at 3K. Very subtle, but tightening up the low end some. You can see the frequency analyzer changing with it. It tightens up the low end.
From the day we met, girl, you turned my head just with the way.
and that's adding a nice high end. And then this is the if you like, it's like an SSL compressor right here, and it's just nice and punchy and bright.
From the day we met, girl, you turned my head just with the way you move. And those words you said, I never will forget. You'll always be true. Oh, baby, hey, hey, mama.
Sweet. So that's kind of an overview of the song. The last thing I wanted to show you and just talk about here was just, you know, paying attention to your automation of what you're doing all the time on this. Like, for example, like every time he's singing, my guitars are a little bit to the left over here, so it's not right down the middle where his vocals are.
My mind, get on your best.
Then when I get to a interlude part here and there's no more vocals, I'm panning it back to the center and I'm pushing the guitar a little bit louder.
We're gonna have a really good time.
Like same thing here.
Oh my mind,
Gets background
on your best dress, honey.
Doing the solo kicks in.
We're gonna have a really good time.
Now it's in the middle and it's louder. And then even small spots like this, I'll go ahead and do.
Always be true.
Like in this little section right here.
Hey, hey, mama. Everything is alright.
So, and then the last thing I'll just show you, just like, I mean, really all I was doing with this is I'm using this to punch. This is just a very quick master I was doing through the Slate mastering console here. So pushed a little lows, did a little detail. I'm doing a little light compression, again, just to tap it. Then I'm just pushing it up to make sure the ceiling stays up and giving a little dynamics.
Hey, mama. Everything is alright.
And from going through the drums, setting your levels, to making things natural and bright and punchy, but then just, you know, trying to keep the natural sound of what they do. That's going to be the goal that we want to try to achieve with country. So this is how I would approach a country mix. If this was, you know, even more modern sounding one, you know, I might even go a little bit crazier on the shimmery stuff. But for the most part, all the kind of moves that I made right there will really help you approach this kind of genre or any natural sounding, you know, genre that you're going to in the blues, in any of that kind of stuff. Anything that you want to sound natural, it could be acoustic, indie, any of that. You know, you can use these plugins that are a little more subtle and not as aggressive as some of the other stuff we looked at. But thanks everyone for watching. That's my take on country, mixing country. So I hope that helps everyone out, and y'all have a great rest of the week, and I will see you next time. Later.
Thanks everybody for watching. If you found this content useful, please like this video. It will tell YouTube to show it to others. If you are enrolled, please go to the Seminars tab on the my.trcoa website and take the quiz over tonight's lesson. And if you need to book one-on-one time with an instructor, text 512-231-0344. If you aren't enrolled, go to trcoa.edu to find out more information about what we do. Also, please post in the chat subjects you'd like to see for our upcoming live streams. And as always, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you guys on the flip side. Bye, everybody.